Party's national convention is taking place. Now, the guest of honor at tonight's event is Joe Kent, the U.S. Director of Counterterrorism, who stepped down to protest Donald Trump's attack on Iran, which he said is totally unnecessary, unprovoked, and wrong.
Well, thank you all very much, and thanks for that amazing and warm introduction. I'm honored to be here with you guys. I think this is a very noble cause and a great venue for all of us to come together for the opportunity to build unity around ending these wars, and in particular the one that we are spiraling towards closer and closer every day, which is a greater escalation in this war in Iran. We got some sort of good news last night. It seems like they're working towards a peace deal, and we've heard this before, so obviously, you know, we're all skeptical at this point. We're not 100% sure it's going to work out, but I personally believe that President Trump can see that we are in a very bad way because the results don't lie. The Straits of Hormuz was open before, now the Straits of Hormuz is shut down. The price of the pump is skyrocketing. There doesn't appear to be a military solution because if there was, President Trump would simply execute the military solution. But as he's seen with all the different options he's kind of ran through, the military solution isn't going to work. And so now we're in a really tough position. I can get into some of the details in terms of the negotiating. However, I really don't see a clear-cut way out of this. And so I think it's really important rooms like this continue to gain momentum so the president can hear, number one, we reject this war. And I think he understands that because, basically won his way into the White House with a very anti-war message. And although it wasn't perfect in the first administration, he did keep us out of new wars. He made attempts to get our troops out of the Middle East. And so for him to make the mistakes that he's made to get us into this situation, I think he knows he needs a way out. And so the way that we build momentum and let him know that we want him to get out of this war, and as a matter of fact, we really don't care too much on the details. At this point, he can say that he's won. He does it pretty much every time he talks about the Iran war. So I think as long as he knows, the vast majority of us say, right on, Mr. President, you took out their military, you killed a bunch of their leaders, bring our guys home, let's reset from there. Because all of the other options that we have just have us spiral further into this war. And that's a big reason why I had to step away and resign. Number one, I morally couldn't stand by the war. I fought in the war on terror. For most of my adult life, I did 11 combat tours. I truly believed in what we were doing at the very, very beginning. I wanted to defend my country. I believed we had been attacked. I believed the line, forgive me, I was 23 years old. I believed that there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and that we were going to go find some Al-Qaeda guys over there. It didn't take me very long to figure out, though, that we had been lied to. And I was deeply frustrated and angered at those in my government who knew better. But in particular, a lot of the combat veterans who had fought in our previous wars, who had fought in Vietnam, who were now part of the government in 2002, 2003, and they knew they were lying us into a war. Good men like Colin Powell, who knew better. Their legacy essentially was selling us and getting us into the Iraq war. And so I made a promise to myself in my 20s that I never knew I'd actually have to cash in at some point. I promised myself if I was ever in a position to prevent young men and young women from going into a needless war, that I would speak out, that I would do something. Fast forward 20 plus years, and I found myself in that position. I found myself in President Trump's administration, was honored to be there, was leading the National Counterterrorism Center. It was a job I felt was very important because we do have real terrorist threats that have only gotten worse because of this war. But I wanted to actually help President Trump deliver on his campaign promises. And watching a foreign government, watching the Israelis march right in and basically dictate terms to us and manipulate American intelligence, manipulate the media, manipulate those around President Trump to put us into this war, I knew that I had to leave. I knew I had to start speaking out because I couldn't stand by and watch more body bags come into Dover and have this become... I think it was important to get the truth out there because I personally, had I not been there at the executive branch level, I wouldn't believe the influence that the Israeli lobby has. Again, forgive me for my ignorance. I read all the books and I had seen it a little bit when I was in Special Forces and when I was in the CIA as an operations officer, but I didn't truly see the level of influence they had until I was actually working at the executive branch. And I know a lot of people in this room, I see Scott's here, Scott's been talking about this for decades, really. But I honestly, until I saw it firsthand, I didn't know actually how bad it truly is. And I think if most Americans knew the extent at which the Israeli lobby, the Israeli influence, whatever you want to call it, influenced our decisions to get us into this war and all the other, post 9/11 Middle Eastern wars, they would be absolutely furious. Now, luckily for us, we've had enough people out there speaking the truth, pushing back against the Israeli lobby. And if you just look at the way that this message is resonating with the younger generation, I'm very, very optimistic about the future. It was a gut punch to watch Massey be defeated the other night. But when you looked at the demographic breakdown, when you looked at basically Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, and everything else below the age of, 55, 60, they're with us 100%. They're against this war. You can't lie to them about the foreign influence. And if we can get them out there and we can mobilize them to vote, we can start winning elections up and down the ballot.
I'm going to do it, Joe.
I think we are going to do it. I think this is a very informed audience, so I'm going to speak kind of at a little bit more of a granular level. I think one of the most important things for those of us that are in this coalition of people who believe that we've got to just stop getting into all these foolish wars. We've got to get our foreign policy back on track. We've got to stop sending so much money overseas. That's a very basic, high-level principle that I think most Americans can agree on, but a very broad coalition of the political spectrum can agree on that. And if we can unify on that, especially in terms of who sits in the White House, we can actually make a real difference. Because at the end of the day, during most election cycles, a lot of different social issues will come up, a lot of different domestic issues will come up, and that will kind of carry the day with what gets talked about and how people vote. But when you're talking about the executive branch, you're talking about the president's stance on foreign policy and who he's going to let dictate his foreign policy basically controls everything else. Just look what's taking place right now. President Trump also, in addition to the anti-war position that he had, he ran on a lot of domestic priorities. Immigration, he ran on affordability. These are all cornerstone domestic issues that affect people's daily lives. He really hasn't been able to dedicate a lot of time to those topics because we've been convinced that we have to go to war with, at first it was the Houthis for some reason, and then we needed to go to get sucked into this Iran war, and in between we're trying to play referee in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, because somehow who controls the Donbass is like deeply important to people in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I think truly fears on both sides of the aisle, the left and the right. They truly fear us having people who understand, number one, that we have to get our foreign policy in order. We've got to stop spending so much blood and treasure in these wars. But also, if we can inform the electorate enough to say, hey, we're going to disagree on social issues, but when it comes time to vote top of the ticket, we need a strong commitment, and we need people with a proven track record who will stand up against the influence that push us into more foreign wars. Because until we get the foreign policy under control, there basically is no domestic policy. We can have all our disputes, and people can vote in accordance with their cause of the day, whether it's health care or some kind of cultural war issue down the ballot, because really that's more controlled at the state level anyways. If we can build a broad anti-war coalition that makes sure that we actually get our foreign policy under control and begin the wars, we can get this country back on track. Washington, D.C. doesn't want people to know that. They want the bipartisan consensus, which is sending us off to war continuously. The Democrats have war hawks. The Republicans have war hawks. They fear us actually coming together. So I think what you guys are building here with this event, with the libertarian movement, with a lot of the different independent groups, I think we've got a potential to take over and influence both parties, especially if we can mobilize enough young people to vote, that we can finally put these policies into action. I think we can't take the bait of letting other issues divide us. There's a wide variety of thoughts on everything else after foreign policy, and that's fine. Because once we get our foreign policy under control and we stop spending so much time on war, we can actually sort out everything else in our country. And we're going to need a lot of different diversity of opinions to actually get that done effectively. So I think it's very important that we continue to keep up as much pressure as we can respectfully on the administration. I say respectfully because that's actually going to get their attention. President Trump put together a really amazing coalition that got him 77 million votes. Those weren't all Republicans. There was a lot of libertarians. There was a lot of independents. There was a lot of first-time Trump voters. So if we let him know very, very vocally but respectfully on social media and through other platforms that we reject this war, and also more importantly, we're okay with him just walking away. Like right now, they're twisting themselves in the knots. They're doing everything they can. They're twisting themselves in the knots, trying to come up with some kind of a deal. And I think the message has to be like, you don't need a deal just to leave. We can literally just walk away. And we'll sort out the rest later once we avoid the war. And I personally believe that the president then will actually have more leverage, because everything the Iranians are using as leverage right now over America, basically it's shutting down the Straits of Hormuz, and the Iranians are justified in doing that in their public messaging. They're saying they're justified in shutting down the Straits of Hormuz because we're there as the aggressors. If we leave as the aggressors, the Iranians are not going to want to piss off everybody else in the Gulf. They're not going to want to piss off the Chinese, the Indians, the Russians. They're going to let the Straits of Hormuz become open again because it's good for their business. Another big leverage point that we have right now in the Middle East, and I say leverage against us, is all the amount of forces and troops and bases that we have in the region. That gives the Iranians the ability to strike us if they want to. And this last iteration of the war proved that our bases in the region are not a strategic asset, they're a strategic liability.
Yeah.
And so, if we remove those troops, they've actually got less options to attack us. So again, it's tactically a smart move. It's not a retreat whatsoever. We've proven that we can fly halfway across the world and bomb them again if we need to. I'm not for that, but we could do it if we wanted to. So basically, for President Trump to pull out right now and declare victory, it's win-win-win. It will help him put the coalition back together again. And going forward, now that President Trump's going to be out of the political scene in 2028, we just have to bring in people that are going to make a firm commitment and have a proven track record that they will not support us getting into these wars, that they will kick the Israeli influence and every other foreign influence agent out of our government and actually finally put the American people first.
Yeah.
I'll just leave you with a thought on Memorial Day weekend. Tomorrow's Memorial Day, and Memorial Day is obviously the day where we honor all of our fallen, those who gave their last full measure for our nation. And I have said for a very, very long time that the best way for us to honor our fallen is to make sure that we do not send any more young men and young women off to die on foreign battlefields. There's a very little known part of Memorial Day. If you actually read the code that codified Memorial Day into U.S. law, it says we remember our fallen on this day, but it also calls for a national prayer for a lasting peace. So again, we honor our fallen by fighting on and making sure we don't send any more young men and women off to die on foreign battlefields. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Speakers highlighted the fact that the USA has the largest military budget of any country in the world by far. Yet, areas like this one, here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, have been let to rot. Education is being cut, roads are falling apart, but there's more and more money for war. Bombs and death and destruction around the world. About all the people who voted for Trump because they wanted to end wars, where do they go now?
I mean, that's me. That's my coalition, right? That's why I'm so outraged about everything that's happened. I supported that man for a decade straight, and what do you tell the average American that saw the political ads, that saw the trailers saying no new wars, no neocon wars in the Middle East? I mean, he went over to Saudi 6 months before starting this war and literally promised them a complete departure from the policy of the past. Come to find out that's all a fake out. It just makes us feel like we got played, and it's building this new coalition that really matters. And you're witnessing kind of the infancy of that.
Like a new coalition, you mean like left and right together against wars?
Post-duopoly, Americans are realizing they've been played by the Democrat and Republican Party system. We are going to leave that behind, specifically the young people. It is the boomer population, and that's people born after World War II and the period immediately after, for the foreign listeners viewing and listening to this. That is a population of people that has been brought up on this Israeli first doctrine of this this, state in Levant being the same state of a few thousand years ago. We don't believe that's the case. The vast majority of young people understand this as a colonial project, as a money laundering project, as a military-industrial complex project, and we stand against it.
What do you think of Tulsi Gabbard stepping down?
What do I think of Tulsi Gabbard stepping down? I think you got to look at it in the context of what's been going on with not only her family situation. I think that's a real situation because, you have to always figure out what the calculus is going to be with your priorities to your family. And obviously her husband has been there for her during the last several years with her campaigning and whatnot. But I think a lot of people that are following the situation closely politically are probably going to maybe have some assumptions that may be right or not as it relates to, especially in light of Joe Kent resigning in such a public way. 100+ million people saw it. It's probably the most vocal public resignation ever in the history of humanity. Let's face it.
What's going on in the Trump administration?
Well, we know Joe Kent stepped down as a matter of principle and refusing to be a part of the war. I don't think I really know for sure what's going on with Tulsi. There was a report the day before she resigned that the CIA was spying on her, even though she's supposed to be the boss over the CIA, in a sense at least. And then the next day she resigned, but they say it's because her husband has health reasons, which I guess is a plausible explanation as well. So I really don't know.
So what about people that say that criticizing the Israel lobby is anti-Semitic? You shouldn't bring that up. What do you say to those people?
Well, 2015 time period, they used to call you a racist and a Nazi, if you were just okay with being white, right? So I just view it as that. If you're against the data center, you're a Democrat now. If you're against the war, you're a Democrat or anti-Semite or whatever. It means nothing, okay? When you apply the label broadly where it doesn't belong, it ceases to mean anything, right? And I would say, as far as anti-Semitism goes, Benjamin Netanyahu is the greatest anti-Semite to ever live.
Why is that?
Well, he's generated the most anti-Jewish hate, with his actions. And I think that's plain to see. Ben Gvir, close second, I would say, with the flotilla actions, but it's just plain for everyone to see. The emperor has no clothes, and that's what I forgot to say in my speech. The emperor has no clothes.
And who's really running U.S. foreign policy?
Well, we're being told that Marco Rubio is not only the Secretary of State, where a majority of ambassador positions are filled by Biden holdovers, and there's barely maybe 10 or 20% that have been appointed and confirmed, appointed by Trump, confirmed by Senator Risch's Foreign Relations Committee and John Thune's Senate majority, as a Senate Majority Leader. So I would say that that's an F. He's also the National Security Advisor. Basically, what's been going on since last July? So we've had a dual-hatted National Security Advisor / Secretary of State, and what have we seen since then, particularly post-Charlie Kirk assassination? We've seen a complete flip in our foreign policy, and I attribute that to, with Elon Musk out in May, basically May 31st, with Charlie Kirk out on September 10th for being assassinated. Since then, I think most of America views that our foreign policy and White House policy is fully driven by Miriam Adelson. And so when you look at that from that perspective, you can't deny it. And who are our surrogates, affiliates, and associates, particularly with Joe Kent coming out and saying, hey, the lobby, Israeli government, intel services, and their affiliates are the ones driving foreign policy in the White House. So who does that include? The indicators are clear. The Mark Levins, the Laurel Loomers, the who else? The Ted Cruzes, who else in the Senate? We've seen this guy right here, Lindsey Graham. So right now we're seeing over the last 24 hours, President Trump is trying to secure a peace deal because he's seeing that he's losing support. As a 6-time Trump voter, 3 in the primary, 3 in the general, he's losing his hardcore supporters because America needed him back in office to be able to reverse all the harms and pain of the illegitimate Biden criminal syndicate. But then when we start to see him doing a 180 flip on many policies or not reaching the objectives that he campaigned on, it's a betrayal. He betrayed us. It's not the other way around. And unfortunately, he's listening to the ones that are most vocal and closest to him because I think he's told, you got to watch Fox News. Well, that's the ecosystem that Joe Kent, I think, is referring to. The Mark Levin ecosystem, right? The Lindsey Graham ecosystem. The Ted Cruz ecosystem. Golfing buddies with Lindsey Graham, right? And then on top of that, to go back to your question, right now it's a fight internally on whether or not we're going to announce that we have achieved victory, I mean, or not. And the driving factor behind this is Bibi Netanyahu is doing everything in his power to retain power in his position. If you do use your favorite AI chat tool or whatever, Grok, ChatGPT, and you start to ask the question, what motivates Bibi Netanyahu to force Donald Trump and the United States to go to war on behalf of Bibi? It's simply to keep him in power, because 1/3 is in support of Bibi at home, at his home in Israel. 1/3 is against him, and 1/3 is kind of like whatever. So he's using this as a mechanism to retain power.
So the world economy is screaming as a result of the Strait of Hormuz being closed. Trump says there might be a deal with Iran, but now we're starting to hear other things. And at this point, inflation is through the roof. The people who voted for Trump wanted him to stop the inflation, wanted him to end these wars. What's happening?
Yeah, well, I think we'd be really lucky if they strike a deal now. The Iranian and American positions are so far apart that, we can be hopeful but not optimistic, basically, right? I think the real solution is actually Joe Kent's proposal, which is that Trump simply cut and run. Don't sign a deal, just leave. And then at that point, then the entire burden shifts onto Iran to figure out how to deal with the rest of Eurasia, not our problem. And so that is actually the simplest and cleanest solution to the problem. That's one where Trump can also save some face, too.
Yeah.
But for them to come to an agreement on the fate of all the uranium and missiles and alliances with Hezbollah and all that, none of that is going to really be resolvable at this stage. So it's a really tough situation.
It seems like there's a trend, because more and more people are agreeing with the kind of things that you say, there's a trend of cracking down and silencing people, whether it's taking away their social media, whether it's, deporting students for their Palestine views. There's what was done to your father where they sued him, into silence. What do you make of this trend?
Well, people are bucking the censorship really hard. I'm glad that you brought that up. In 2018, we were the first people to ever be deplatformed. Hundreds of my videos from my time as a child political pundit gone. But you look at that model, they try to apply it today. People are getting angry. People are getting upset. They want freedom of thought. They want freedom of expression. And mostly, you've seen the war footage. You've seen what's happened in these areas. It's unconscionable. And people that say it's all CGI or made up, people that do that, in my opinion, a lot of times are being paid. So I think the reality is very clear to everybody around what's really happening in the world, and America is not a positive force.
Okay. Now, what about Russia-Ukraine?
What about Russia-Ukraine?
Is there any hope for a peace deal?
Well, apparently President Trump was going to be the peacemaker, right?
Yeah.
He was trying to get the Nobel Peace Prize, right?
Yeah.
But I think the military-industrial complex doesn't want him to have a Nobel Peace Prize because they don't want peace.
Yeah.
Who makes money off of peace? The military-industrial complex sure doesn't.
Yeah.
It can't launder money when you send it over there in the form of Ukraine aid or in the form of Israel aid, so that it's laundered back into the political apparatus in America to keep both Democrat and Republican incumbents in power.
Now, are you hopeful about peace with Russia?
Well, yeah, hopeful but not optimistic.
Yeah.
Again, both sides are very far apart. The Russians have not finished winning. They are winning, but very slowly.
Yeah.
And the Ukrainians are not willing to give up and turn around and abandon land that they're still standing on. And they still have Western support. And so I'm afraid it could grind on for another few years even. Who knows?
Libertarian Party convention. You've been at the convention.
Yeah, so I came here to speak at this event.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to be here until the last minute, yesterday, essentially, or the day before. Well, it was yesterday. And I did attend. I spoke with some folks. I get a couple of highlights of who I spoke with were, you got the Iowa delegation. I guess there's somebody that's running for Senate. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that there's a district attorney that's the senior elected Libertarian Party member that's a district attorney in one of the counties in Iowa who's running for U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
I found that to be pretty interesting. And his push was to have, in jury instructions, jury nullification included in that. So that's a freedom-promoting event.
Yeah.
The other folks that I spoke with was a lady running for U.S. Senate in South Carolina.
Yeah.
I'm obviously speaking at this event. I don't think we need a war to be able to address issues. If we have threats and enemies out there, we can surgically remove people, but we don't need a full-scale war, ground invasion. That's what funds the military-industrial complex and makes money for the Mark Levins of the world and the Lindsey Grahams. But it doesn't do anything for.
Who is running U.S. foreign policy?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, ultimately, the president is the one who holds the authority. He's the only one allowed to sit in that chair and call so many of those shots. So that is, he's not just a figurehead, right? Like, that is the legit answer. But that's also maybe the more narrow answer. Overall, the system is geared towards Israeli, Zionist goals, right, for a greater Israel, aligned with, of course, big industries like arms sales, and in some cases oil, although I think less so nowadays as far as the oil companies being behind the wars. But they call it's a permanent war economy, right, where so much of the economy is invested in perpetuating the thing. It kind of runs until it runs into a wall.
Yeah. Americans are going to start voting third party?
I think this is a massive opportunity with independent media. As we saw with Thomas Massey, literally in a ragtag group of 20, 30 independent content creators literally put on notice $30 million of AIPAC and AIPAC-aligned funding in order to remove an incumbent that was wildly popular in the district and nationally. So I saw that. I was there last week observing, and by the morning of the election, I viewed that as a complete, massive, disruptive victory. Because even didn't matter what the numbers would show by the end of the night, it literally showed that independent, truth-telling content creators have just as much, actually have more influence over the electorate than Fox News or the entire mainstream combined when you look at it as a one-for-one dollar amount. If the spend rate for Massey's campaign was the same as it was for the Miriam Adelson puppet, it would have been a blowout. It would have probably been an 80 to 90% vote for Massey. But because the numbers were as they were, they purchased that seat. And they had to deploy the Secretary of War to violate the Hatch Act, to then coerce, manipulate, induce, and literally threaten through the show of force of the entire Department of War, even though he said he was in his personal capacity, which no one believes, to coerce the electorate in that district to vote the only voice critical of the unconstitutional military intervention in Iran on behalf of Israel, which is there is no congressional authorization, ergo it is an unconstitutional endeavor, especially when you send boots on the ground.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. Last question, right? A lot of what Joe Kent has said, what you have said tonight and others focuses on the foreign influence of Israel, in American politics, which is a completely legitimate issue. But are you concerned about using the allegation that people are foreign agents to silence free speech, right? I know they recently arrested some people allegedly for activism related to Cuba.
I don't approve of that at all. I don't approve of that at all. What I will say is I want honest disclosure, right? And that's super important to me. And here's the thing. It's not that other countries are bad. It's that global financial capital is the problem. And I mean, look at American media companies. A lot of American media companies are propped up by foreign money. You can look at Salem Media as an example. There's a lot of examples of this. So I would just say I'm for a free marketplace of ideas, and I want to be able to compete and talk to everyone around the world. But we have one nation with outsized influence, and it's very clear to see who that is.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks. Yeah. So have you been at the Libertarian Party convention?
I'm afraid so, yes.
Oh, and how's it going?
Okay. I try to vote with my people as best I can.
Do you think Americans are going to start voting third party in response to how things are getting?
Maybe a little as a protest vote.
Mm-hmm. But you don't see it becoming, a challenge for big major parties?
Most of it will just stay home.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for talking to us. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't want to die in the desert for a foreign state that's committing multiple genocides.
Yeah.
My dear friends in Michigan, I'm sorry that I couldn't be there to join you in person. I'm actually here at JFK Airport right now. We are here to greet the activists who are on the last flotilla. You may have seen some of the images coming out of Israel where Ben-Gvir was parading them around and just acting like the tyrant that he is. But I'm here to wish you all a greeting at the Rage Against the War Machine event because I stand with you in spirit. Obviously, the interventions process that we started 4 years ago, where we would stand up and denounce all kinds of politicians, whether it was AOC and her hypocrisy or Mike Pompeo for being a bloodthirsty war criminal, and now our run against Richie Torres in the 15th Congressional District in doing something where we're starting in the Democratic primary and going into the general election. There are various actions that we're taking here in New York City, but also to know that all of you around the country and around the world are taking actions as well to stand up against tyranny and dictatorship and to free us from the Epstein class. It warms my heart to know that there is solidarity around the country. So again, I'm sorry that I can't be there with all of you in Michigan. I wish I could be, but there is no better way to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country than with some good old-fashioned interventions and a new revolution. So thank you all.